Hello folks, my name's Toby. Usual Friday vlog, thanks for tuning in. Now I'm going to reflect on a few things that have happened over the last few days, go back to one or two things I mentioned in last week's vlog, and then look forward to a really busy week ahead. So I ended last week's vlog, I think, talking about different perspectives. So the feedback from our patients about CMHT, the feedback from our GPs about some aspects of services, the work we've been doing with both patients and staff in the Culture of Care programme. And I probably said something like, it's important to hold a mirror up and consider those perspectives seriously, but they're not a final judgment. And of course, this week, we've had the Care Quality Commission visit us for some of our older adult and working age adult mental health services. And the same will be true of their perspective when we get it in a little while. I just wanted to thank everybody who's been so responsive and so welcoming in answering questions, talking about what works well in your service and being open about things that are not so good. And it's really important when we have these kind of processes that we're able to balance those two sides of things, the things that work and the things that are not working so well for patients and for teams. So an important perspective, of course, given that that was a focus on our mental health inpatient wards, you'd expect me to draw your attention again to the high quality therapeutic care task force, to the work the board asked us to do to improve the consistency of care we provide across our wards, and the work that colleagues are doing right now to think about things like, as I say, culture of care, length of stay in our wards, and some core safety measures as well, all building towards that Royal College of Psychiatrists accreditation that we want to see us getting across the organisation. Do you want to know a bit more about the HQTC? There are some open sessions, details on the screen as I talk, where you can come along and almost do an Ask Me Anything as we develop the work of that group. Remember, there's lots of people who are matrons, who are service managers, who are consultant psychiatrists and other professions who are part of that body alongside patients and our social care colleagues. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there is a common voice, isn't there, across our organisation, that for inpatient care there is room for improvement, and it's over the course of this year where we'll be trying to do just that work. Now, last week I celebrated the colleagues who were invited to be part of the 24-25 anniversary celebrations for distinguished service. I think they used to be called long service. And I was thrilled with reports of how beautiful and how moving and how supportive that ceremony had been earlier this week. I think 58 colleagues in the end were present. I hope you and where you had loved ones with you, your family, also found that to be a recognition of all that you are and have contributed to Ardash. But I'm also conscious that when you do something like that, people reach out to suggest how demotivated, fed up they are about not being recognised in different ways. And I'm going to say a little bit about this in this film, and then I've published some frequently asked questions with this film to deal with how we're going to address that. So the Clinical Leadership Executive 2024 decided with our new Distinguished Service Awards that we would recognise Ardash service as distinct from NHS whole life service. We also introduced an additional recognition at year 10, and we altered the pattern of what people were gifted compared perhaps to what happened in the past. It was, if you like, a little bit more generous, and it was also immediate rather than at the point of someone's retirement. And I'm content that those are the right choices that colleagues and myself made, and that's the system we will have going forward. Of course, there are people who'd worked for Ardash on the bank, and that service certainly counts in the system I've just described. And for the one or two people who may have been overlooked, therefore, in that process, we will be in touch with you to right that wrong. A number of colleagues have reached out to me then to raise their concern that during the pandemic period, ceremonies and processes didn't necessarily proceed. I think in 2020 and 2021, I'm right to say that those who were eligible under the old scheme received things through the post. We're just checking whether everybody received their badge as well as a certificate and some chocolates. And there's an email address you can reach out to if in 2020 or 2021 you think you should have been due something and you didn't receive it. Now, what that leaves is folk in 2022 and 2023 who effectively were left out of the old regime and haven't been picked up by what's been going on very recently through CLE. I'll be writing to all of those people over the course of the next week, inviting them to be part of a ceremony and to receive recognition under the system that CLE has now approved, so effectively retrospectively applying it over the previous 2 years. I would recognise in saying all of that will still leave some people, as it were, out of the loop. Please use that email address or get in touch with me directly to have a dialogue about that. But I hope it demonstrates not only that this organisation takes the Distinguished Service Awards fiercely seriously, but we're also very interested in people's feedback and will make adjustments on the basis of that feedback. Now, I've mentioned CLE a few times in this vlog, and I do generally. I was reminded the other day by one of our consultants that for some people, perhaps, where decisions get made remains a little bit confusing in our organisation. If I'm honest, it probably shouldn't be, because there's a very simple slide that sets out the decision-making committees and groups of this organisation. And there's a few myths and rumours that I wanted to dispel, and there are slides on the screen that speak to that in this process. So, yeah, notion that the trust makes decisions without involving people, I think perhaps is dispelled through the scale of the groups that are on that slide, or that decisions are made by one individual rather than by a collective basis. Of course, there are some individuals where a decision will fall to them, either because that's their professional expertise or their accountability. But generally, as an organisation, we're trying to encourage our directorates to lead, our 6 groups to lead, and then those decision-making meetings are where we come together to make collective decisions. If your group isn't on that chart, well, in the nicest possible way, it means it's still very valuable. It's an advisory group. It can feed in, it can contribute, it will doubtless influence. We've talked about professional advisory groups previously, but the small number of meetings that are shown on that screen are where we come together, generally with a majority of practicing clinicians in the room, to make decisions in this organisation. So it's a streamlined system. It's intended to keep pace with what the NHS needs to do over the next year, the next 2 years, the next 3 years. If you've got any questions about that, as we would call it, operating model, do feel free to reach out and to ask them. Now, I mentioned that next week there was a lot going on. Obviously, this week we have VE Day celebrations across our community, as well as some really challenging things happening internationally in the world. In the week ahead, we have Worldwide International Nurses Day to celebrate on Monday. We have a learning half day on Wednesday, where our staff networks in particular have a focused event they'd love you to get involved in, especially perhaps if you've never been involved in one of our staff networks before. And then, as I say, towards the end of the week, we've got an opportunity to do Ask Me Anything in relation to the High Quality Therapeutic Care Task Force. There's a lot on, and I haven't even talked about the rugby announcements yesterday. Have a fantastic week. I think we've got just the one more bank holiday to live through before we get to the summer. And remember, in the summer, we've got the annual members meeting. Thanks a lot.